And we're live. Welcome, everyone. A live stream. Wow, it's been an extra week, hasn't it? We had a little bit of a delay, a 7-day delay. But everything is still here. That's the important part. Let's post on the chat rooms that we are alive and well. Let's post on the website that we're live. That would be good. Where did I put that? How about right there? Let's click the reset cookie. Let's save the changes. That's nice. We got that going for us. Recordings are going. You can see our Cylons going down there. We've got websites updated. What else do we need to update? I think that's it. I think we are in good shape. It was an interesting week, everybody. You missed out. For those of you that have been following this, whether you're watching this live or on the replay, this is our Network Plus study group for October of 2018. We'll be starting in about 8.5 minutes. This is the pre-show. And this is a week late because we had Hurricane Michael come through a week earlier, last Wednesday. So I had to postpone the study group until this week and then sat around for 5 days without power. So really just getting things back to normal. It even took another day or so to get internet access back. So I wasn't quite so sure how that was going to go. But here we are, and everything's still in one piece, and we seem to be streaming, and YouTube appears to be working, which wasn't the case last night, but now it's working. But everything seems to be here. We're in pretty good shape here. This is the pre-show. We'll get started with this in another 7.5 minutes. I've got chats are up. You should be able to see the chat on there. Welcome. Hello, Grayson. Oh, boy. See, another example of Hurricane Michael. I had a lot of trees down here, but we were far enough away from the storm that we just got tropical storm force winds, which still took out 4 enormous trees in my yard. So that's one of those things that happens. You're just sort of used to it at this point. That's Let's see how we're doing with everything else. We seem to be up and running. There was absolutely no damage to my home or the studio. Let's do a quick check of cameras, though. Hi, camera. Camera 2. Camera 3. I guess we could probably put this so it's actually visible. Did I get rid of... look at all this junk I have running. Let's get rid of that. That's good. That's pretty good. And 4, I need to put something up on the screen that we can actually see. So let's get this on the screen with that. And let's try camera 4. That's good. All right. See, it all works. Everything you need to know for linking to questions, to answers, and everything else is at professormesser.com/live. You'll be able to see that. So there is, what else do we have going here? I think we're good. We've got recordings going in 2 places, 3 places, 2 here and 1 in the cloud. And we've got plenty here. How about this? Is this working? Yes, it is. So things are in pretty good shape here, all things considered. There's still people here in Tallahassee that do not have power. So I'm incredibly fortunate to be able to do this today. So that's good. We've got another 5 minutes before we get started in the Network Plus study group. This is the pre-show. This is me making sure things are working. And then, well, I could do this just offline. I can do pretty much all of this without you being here, but it's just more fun to hang out, at least chat with folks, see where everybody is. And I've got plenty to go through today. I've actually obviously finished this study group, I don't know, 2 weeks ago well before the storm came through, well before we knew a storm was coming through, and then finished next week's Security Plus study group I finished today. So we've got some options there. Got things we can do. I've got plenty to talk about. The problem was just having electricity. It's the little things, isn't it? So we'll put all these things up so that people can find it. There's the link to the study group. So now you have exactly the right place to go, which has the chat on it as well. If you're watching this on the YouTube side, you'll notice the YouTube chat is not enabled because I only have so many eyeballs. The chat that I will be monitoring is at professormesser.com/live, which I also put in the video description. So if you just want to click on it, it'll take you over there. It's the same video. It's just got a chat embedded on the page. You can pop out the chat, do other things with it, etc. Okay. Yes, it's been a little crazy here in North Florida with the weather, with the hurricane that came through. I have family members that owned a house in Mexico Beach, which has been all over the news. That house obviously not there anymore. Just not there. You wake up in the morning, the house isn't there anymore. It's not a place they lived and nobody was in it, but the house and all of its things that were inside are no longer around anywhere. Just not there. So anyway, Linux Plus or Cloud Plus in the future. Probably not a Cloud Plus. Hardly anyone asks for that. Linux Plus is in the process of being updated by CompTIA, so I'm keeping my eye on that one. Maybe there would be something I can do there. I've tried Linux Plus in the past and was just not happy with a lot of different things about it. Some things that I could control and some things I couldn't. So we'll figure out when the new one comes out if it's something that's appealing to me or not. We'll have to see if that happens. So that's how it goes. Welcome, London. Welcome, Wales. Appreciate you being here. We've got another few minutes before we get started. 2 minutes before we get started. So we'll get those going. Wow, Grayson's got a /27 network at home. You are a glutton for punishment, my friend. I have no patience for anything that doesn't fall in an 8-bit grouping. That's not entirely true. I used to manage a /26 network. So I get it. When do I ask questions? Well, once we start. That's when we ask questions. Don't worry, all of this will be very clear to you in the next minute and a half. I'll tell you exactly how this whole process works. You'll learn how to earn CEUs from this. You'll get the whole thing. You'll get this is not the show. This view of the back of my head is not the actual study group. This is me making sure I have everything ready. So welcome, join in, get something to drink, have a seat, pull up your computer. The link to professormesser.com/QA is the link to the questions and answers. Apparently that's what the QA means. Someone did email me and let me know that was the case. Wasn't quite sure there. Sure. Less than a minute to go. We'll get things rolling. Do I have everything ready to go? I think I do. I think. It's now just a matter of making it happen. And hopefully our internet will stay up. Hopefully our power will stay up. You're never quite sure how this is going to go. So we're about to find out. There's nothing we can do but going forward. If I happen to lose you somewhere in between, just know I'm working hard to get back with you. Stay patient. We'll be able to do something like that. I promise. I will get back to you. And I'm always recording here. I've never done a tour of the studio. I really should do that. I keep saying I'm going to do that at the end of the year one time. I've just never gotten around to that. But now it's time to actually do the study group. Let's go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October 2018 Professor Messer Network Plus study group from the world headquarters of Messer Studios here in Tallahassee, Florida. For those of you joining us live, thank you for being here. We're a week late, you may have noticed. This is now a historical footnote for everyone who's watching the replay, but Hurricane Michael came through last Wednesday. I had to postpone the study group. We're back here a week later. I got quite a bit of problems with power here, but fortunately, the studio is in fine shape. You can see everything is still as it was. No problems there, and our internet's back, so we get to do a study group this week, which is great. We've got things we can go through. I've got plenty of things to go through, I promise you. Make sure that if you are following us on the Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter, you'll get a Network Plus pop quiz question every Tuesday. It's out there. I guess you could go through the archives as well and sort through all that nonsense. There's also, of course, our YouTube page, professormesser.com/YouTube. Make sure you subscribe. It does help quite a bit that I can go to the folks at Google and say, people really do want more of this. How can you help me? And they've been great. I have a person I can call, and that's thanks to you, because you go to that page and you hit the subscribe button. You don't even have to hit the bell for new videos if you don't want to. The subscription is plenty, and I thank you for doing that. There are also, I thank you for the people that have purchased my offline course. Of course, every one of my training courses, every minute of every video available for you to watch for free online. Some of you like an offline version though, and I have offline versions for sale. Those offline versions include the HD video. They include audio versions of those videos in MP3 format. You've got them completely captioned by human beings. This is not the automated captioning that you've seen on YouTube. And in fact, if you're watching on YouTube, you can hit those caption links as well. Those are the human captioned video closed captioning that's there. So it's actually very, very high quality captions. There's also course notes that come with this. We'll talk more about the course notes in a bit, but if you're purchasing my offline videos, you get that for free as well. You can learn more about that at professormesser.com/getnetplus. There are also Network Plus questions that are archived from this study group. We only have a few out there for the N10007 right now because that particular exam is relatively new. But as we do more of these questions in our study groups, we add more to the archive. You can find all of those along with A+ and Security Plus questions at professormesser.com/popquiz. We've got also audio versions of this. So if you wanted to have this study group automatically show up in your podcasting, listening, catching program, simply go to professormesser.com/podcast, and you can follow those RSS feed links to add it to your existing podcast, or you can listen from that page. I also have this podcast syndicated to other resources as well. So if you're on an Android, I know that Google has their own audio podcasting service. If you have Spotify, you can search for Professor Messer on Spotify, all of those things. So you've got plenty of things you can go through to find replays of this particular event, should you care to listen to it. Today, we're going to be doing a lot of questions that come from the latest Network Plus exam, the N10007. This exam was released in March, so this is a relatively new exam. This is October, of course. So this is an exam that has a similar format to the previous version. You could get a maximum of 90 questions. You may get fewer than 90 questions, and you get 90 minutes to answer every single one of them. This is usually an exam where the bulk of it is multiple choice questions, but the first handful of questions that you can expect to get will be what CompTIA calls performance-based questions. We'll talk about those in just a moment. We are going to be asking questions, and you, if you are here live watching this here at 12 noon Eastern Time on Wednesday, October the 17th of 2018, you can follow along with us. You can play along with us by going to open a new browser window and going to professormesser.com/QA. That will allow you to view the questions that we are going to ask and answer them, and we'll get to see how well everybody does. I don't track you as an individual. This is sort of combined all together. We get to see everybody who's here. So your answer is anonymous, but you remember what you answered, and hopefully you'll be able to follow along with us. You can also download the app from Socrative. That's the service that we use. The Socrative Student app is what you want to download onto your favorite app device. It's going to ask you for a room name. Make sure you put in the room name of Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER. So make sure you spell that right, or else you won't see anything in the room, because right now there's a question waiting for you. It's a question actually from last month but this will get you into the question and answer. Make sure that you're able to see everything properly. Make sure you typed in that particular room name. Obviously, if you are not watching this live, you will not be able to follow along in real time with those. There'll be nothing there at professormesser.com/QA for you to see, but you can, of course, still watch on the screen. Our rewind question from last month asks, which of these would be the best way to obtain IP address configuration details on a Linux server? And if you go to professormesser.com/QA, you'll see a number of options available to you. One is ifconfig. The next is ARP. One is ipconfig. The other is netstat, and finally, IP tables. So you've got A through E to choose. You simply choose one of those, and in real time, if we click the right button, I can see what you're answering. So I think a number of you may even remember this one. Right now, as we're doing the rewind, I just go ahead and show you what people are answering, since this is our test question. So you've got 85% of you that chose ifconfig. And indeed, there are newer Linux servers don't even have an ifconfig in them. There's always changes to Linux. Linux is great that way, isn't it? Just when you finally figure out how this thing works, they change everything about it because it was just working. Who needs that, really? So that would be quite the issue. This is a challenge whenever we start working through those. Of how are we going to know what all of these different things are in Linux? There's so many different ways to do it, but fortunately, in Linux, we want to be able to work through the different details of this. Thankfully, in Linux, we've got the commands that we can use. Most of us may get mixed up on the difference between an ipconfig and an ifconfig. Those are two different commands that do similar things. They provide you with IP address information inside of an operating system. If you're in Windows, it's ipconfig. If you're in Linux, it's ifconfig. And as some people have mentioned, even ifconfig seems to be changed, but that's okay because you only need to know currently what's in the CompTIA exam objectives, and that is the command that you will need to know that indeed still today works on about 99% of all Linux devices. So you're fine as it works through that. So hopefully you were able to answer ifconfig, which is answer A, and 86% of you did indeed answer that. So as I ask these questions, make sure you don't put any comments or suggestions or hints in the chat room. Certainly don't answer in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA, go to this screen and choose your answer from there. Well, I mentioned earlier that one of the things that we need to be able to do on this exam is answer multiple choice questions, but I also mentioned that at the beginning of the exam is a set of questions that are not multiple choice. CompTIA calls these performance-based questions. They are anything but multiple choice. They could be drag and drop. They could be fill in the blank. They could be matching. They could ask you to put things in order from highest to lowest or fastest to slowest or vice versa. So you have many different things that could be asked of you at the beginning of the exam. So what I like to do on these study groups, and you can go back for the past year or more and look at all of the different study groups we've done. The first question is a performance-based question. So the performance-based question I have for you today is a matching question. So hopefully that's one we can go through and figure this out. Here is your matching question of the month. I want you to match these DNS record types to their descriptions. Match these DNS record types to their descriptions. And for those of you listening in on the podcast, let me list out what these different DNS record types. They are DNS record type number 1 is SRV. Number 2 is TXT. Number 3 is AAAA. Number 4 is NS. And number 5 is CNAME. And we have 5 different descriptions, A through E, that we can go through. A is IPv6 address of a printer name. We have B, an alias of another device name. C is a list of DNS servers for a domain. D is a list of digital signatures for email signing. And E is the IP address of a Windows domain controller. So maybe some of those will be what you have to deal with. I see some of you in the chat room are mentioning things that you think are on the exam, but really aren't on the exam, especially things that are legacy-based. For instance, somebody in the chat room is mentioning token ring. There's no token ring on the Network Plus exam. All of these record types are on the exam. How do you know what's on the exam or not? One of the things you can do is go to the exam objectives. CompTIA tells you exactly what is going to be on the exam and perhaps more importantly, what is not going to be expected of you on the exam. So certainly one of the things that you could do is go to professormesser.com/objectives, or simply go to the Google machine and type in CompTIA exam objectives. And that will certainly be able to tell you what you need to do to be able to study for this exam. So hopefully that will help you when you work through all of these different things. So this is whenever I start trying to work through the details of this and figure out, what am I going to do? How am I going to get through this? Make sure absolutely that you go through those exam objectives, and you will see all of these whenever you work through this DNS record types. Folks in the chat room are mentioning, that, but token ring was on the exam. No, ring networks are on the exam. That does not necessarily mean token ring. And these days, of course, does not mean token ring. Nobody's running token ring any longer there. But ring networks, of course, are very prevalent, especially with service providers. So that's the big difference there. Make sure you have all of those things that you need to know from the exam objectives. Let's look at these record types and these descriptions. Let's see what the differences are. So let's step through one of these at a time. Let's start with an SRV. An SRV record type, a service record type, is going to give us information about some service that's running on the network. The service may be a mail service. It could be another name resolution service, or in my particular case, should point you to a Windows domain controller. If you're someone who needs to integrate with Windows Active Directory, you'll know when you're working at the NS lookup prompt, or you're performing some type of lookup to a DNS server, that you'll be looking for SRV records, which will point you right to all of the Windows domain controllers. That way, I often will ask people, so what's the IP address of your domain controllers? What's the name of your domain controllers? They have no idea. But if you list out all the SRV record types, you will easily find those and find exactly what those happen to be. The TXT record type is text, and very commonly we'll add different parameters that are simply text records, text information that we could store in the DNS server. A good example of this is D, a list of digital signatures for email signing. So the answer to 1 was E, the IP address of a Windows domain controller. The answer to 2, TXT, is D, a list of digital signatures for email signing. Very common to put those in a text record. Number 3 is quad A, which I said A, which we don't say. We say quad A. The quad A record is the newer version of the A record. The A record gives you an idea of what IPv4 addresses might be out there. AAAA, or the quad A, gives you IPv6 information. So anytime you see a quad A, we're really talking about IPv6. That should be your clue. And the answer is A, IPv6 address of a printer name. So this is where you happen to find those and have those different capabilities available. Number 4 was NS. This stands for name server. And that's where C, a list of DNS servers for a domain, would be found. We very often are going to a NS record, a DNS server to an NS record that takes us to a DNS server. Very common to be able to do something like that. And 5 CNAME would be the thing that you need to work through and have those things there. The CNAME is the canonical name, which is usually an alias of those names. So you can always find a way to go from one device to another by listing a bunch of names. So a server may be called www, but internally that server may be called alpha. That server may be called server 2. And you can put those names all in there as a CNAME, as an alias, as a canonical name, so that it doesn't matter what name you're using, they're all going to the same named device. That way, if you ever change the IP address of that server, you only change the IP address one place in your DNS server, and your CNAME records are now pointing to the change that you just made. Makes it very easy when you're editing updates to your DNS server. So quickly, let's go through. Number 1, the SRV was E, an IP address of a Windows domain controller. Number 2, TXT is D, a list of digital signatures for email signing. Number 3 is quad A, which is A, IPv6 address of a printer name. Number 4, NS is C, a list of DNS servers for a domain. And number 5, CNAME is B, an alias of another device name. Hopefully you were able to match those up. This is only a few of the DNS record types that you need to know on the exam, make sure you go to the exam objectives and you know what every single one of those happens to be. Of course, they can ask you this information as a performance-based question like this, or it may be a multiple choice question they're asking that deals with these different DNS record types. They are all in the exam objectives, and it's important for you to know everything that is listed in there. So make sure you're aware of that as well. Let's now move away from performance-based questions. Now let's do some standard multiple choice questions. I think those might help as we step through these. And our first multiple choice question of the day asks, what type of issue would result from a duplicate MAC address on a local subnet? What type of issue would result from a duplicate MAC address on a local subnet? Would it be A, duplicate packets? Would it be B, no network connection? Would it be C, intermittent connectivity? Would it be D, no internet connectivity? Or would it be E, increased network utilization? Now, if you think you know the answer to this, do not go to the chat room and tell anyone. You want to instead go to professormesser.com/QA and answer the question in Socrative. So what type of issue would result from a duplicate MAC address on a local subnet? Would it be A, duplicate packets? Would it be B, no network connection? Would it be C, intermittent connectivity? Would it be D, no internet connectivity? Or would it be E, increased network utilization? So now we can try to figure that one out. From those of you that have run into duplicate MAC addresses on your local subnets before, you're probably very familiar with these particular answers and what it may be. I've certainly run into this before. It's not very common to find duplicate MAC addresses, but there have been cases where absolutely I have run into that on a network. It's surprising when these things suddenly show up, what the issue might be. So make sure that you're familiar with those as well. This would be one that does come up, and not only duplicate MAC addresses, duplicate IP addresses can have similar types of things. So you need to understand the differences and what you're seeing with connectivity, and where you can go to look at these by simply going to your infrastructure devices and your workstations to try to troubleshoot those types of problems. And if you know what you're looking for, it does become a lot more obvious. This is why when we go through the Network Plus exam objectives, there's a number of command line tools you need to know. Those command line tools can really help you with problems like this one. So our question of what type of issue will result from a duplicate MAC address on a local subnet. Let's see how we've answered this one. How do we do? We're a little torn. We didn't quite get a majority. The highest number, though, we got was C, intermittent connectivity. 43% of you chose that one. We have a tie for second between A, duplicate packets, and B, no network connection at 20 or 19% apiece. Coming in third was D, no internet connectivity at 13%, and only 5% single digits said E, increased network utilization. How do we have duplicate packets have 20% and increased network utilization have 5%? Wouldn't that be the same thing? Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Maybe it was me just putting things down, because neither of those are the correct answer. It's one of those others that's there. Duplicate MAC addresses can be quite a challenge. And as I mentioned, it's not common to see this type of problem. But when you're dealing with third-party hardware, there was a very good example of this that I personally ran into, an associate of mine ran into, that was at an airport that was putting in new scanning equipment, and the scanning equipment from the manufacturer, their embedded MAC addresses were identical. So there was a mix-up during the manufacturing process. You had this two monster scanners. You plug one in, it worked great. You plug in the next one, and they had a problem. Only one would work at any particular time, and they couldn't figure out what was going on. The manufacturing error was certain what was going on there. That was the issue. So what do you do? What circumstance results from that? Well, you're going to have intermittent connectivity, primarily because there's going to be a switch that's responsible for sending information to the correct MAC address. And as long as it knows where that MAC address is, it will send that traffic. Unless another device shows up with the same MAC address, and the switch simply assumes that you've unplugged from one interface and you've plugged into another, and it begins sending the information out the other interface. Except then it receives another packet from the original device and it switches back. And it keeps switching back and forth and back and forth. If you're on the same subnet as these, you can start looking at what your device is recognizing during the ARP process. What MAC address does your device think that particular IP address is associated with? So that's one where you do run into that issue quite a bit. And now that we have virtualized networks, somebody even mentioned this in the chat room, with virtualized networks, you, of course, have the ability to copy VMs. And if you don't configure them properly to update their MAC addresses, then you could potentially have that problem. Most VM systems will check that for you. And if it sees that you have moved this or copied this, it will automatically make sure that those MAC addresses have been changed for you. So that doesn't usually become quite the issue you might think it is on a virtualized network. Usually this is a much bigger problem. So that is our problem. It's an intermittent issue. For those of you that answered C, intermittent connectivity, the 45% of you got that one absolutely right. Absolutely. 19% of you said A, duplicate packets. There would not be a duplication of traffic. Only the ability to communicate to that device might be suffering. We've got 19% of you that said no network connection. At least one of those would allow you to have connectivity at any particular time. There wouldn't be no network connection. You'd have a little bit at least. No internet connectivity. In our case, this particular question was talking about a local subnet. There was no internet involved. And E, increased network utilization. You really aren't increasing utilization. You're only not able to communicate to a device at any particular time with that intermittent connectivity, which was C. That was the right answer. 45% of you got that one right. Well done. Let's do another Network Plus question from the N10007 exam. This question asks, which of the following would be commonly categorized as an EGP? Which of the following would be commonly categorized as an EGP? Would it be A, BGP? Would it be B, SMTP? Would it be C, OSPF? Would it be D, SSL? Or would it be E, MAC? There's too many abbreviations in here. Let's get rid of the A, B, C, D, E. So which of the following would be commonly categorized as EGP? Would it be BGP, SMTP, OSPF, SSL, or MAC? One of those would be the right answer. If you think you know the answer, don't put any messages in the chat room or don't put any information or hints in there. You instead want to go to professormesser.com/QA. And that is where you will want to have this information added to the list. Maybe you can answer. Maybe you know this EGP thing I'm talking about and having those things based on this. That would be a good way to do it. Absolutely. So if you're trying to figure out those details, that's a good way to do it. Step through what you think it may not be and then work your way out from there. So there may be good ways to make that happen. If you're ever trying to, especially on the exam, go through what you think it is and what you think it isn't, those are probably a couple of very good ways to make that happen. Let's see how we did. A number of you answering, a number of you are busy Googling. So stop Googling. That's not what you want to do. You want to instead go out here, figure out the details of this. Pretend that you're sitting down for the exam and there's no internet available. You've got to figure out these details yourself. Let's see how we did. And we're a little mixed on this one too, although 50% of us, so we'll say it's 50.01%. So we have a majority. BGP was the answer, which was A, BGP. 22% of us chose C, OSPF. 13% chose D, SSL. 9% chose B, SMTP. And 6% chose MAC. So this is where you first have to go through a couple of steps with this question because I'm asking you what's categorized as EGP. So you have to know what EGP is. And then I'm asking you all of these other abbreviations as well. So you also have to know what those other abbreviations are. So you have to step through every single one of those to try to figure it out. So let's start with what in the world is an EGP? And that stands for an exterior gateway protocol. These are the things that we often will set up between our routers so that the routers know where all of the different routes happen to be. Very commonly used in dynamic routing protocols. We have a number of protocols we would use on the inside of our network, the interior gateway protocols, or the IGP. We have a different set of dynamic routing protocols we would use on the outside of our network, and those would be an EGP. And the reason we have different protocols depending on where we're sending the traffic is because the characteristics of the networks are so very different. We have a different way of connecting an interior network. We usually have higher bandwidths available on interior networks. Exterior networks need to be more global. They need to work with many more other diverse systems. They also have, generally speaking, slower bandwidths and slower availability of the network than you might have in limited connectivity over the wide area network. On an interior network, on an inside of your network, you have a lot more flexibility on how you connect and even have multiple connections and multiple connections between those. One of the most common EGPs is BGP. They almost sound the same, except one is E as in echo and one is B as in Bravo. So a BGP, border gateway protocol, is indeed one of the most popular, most common exterior gateway protocols that you will run into. If you're connecting to an internet connection, for example, and you're connecting to this using a dynamic routing protocol, you're most likely using BGP for this. Sometimes in a number of cases, if you only have one single link to the internet, you'll find that it's much easier to simply set a static route. But if you are performing multiple connections to the internet over multiple links, and sometimes you just like to have that dynamic capability, then you'll probably be turning on BGP to make that happen. So on a normal network, you might have BGP connecting a lot of different companies together. And inside these different companies, they may choose a different interior gateway protocol, such as RIP or RIP v2. Maybe they're using OSPF on the inside of their network, or perhaps they're using EIGRP on the inside of their network. So you've got different options depending on what you're connecting to and how you're connecting. Sometimes you don't even use any of these. As I mentioned, some people like to do static routing everywhere. It just depends on what your particular use case is and how you would like to manage your network. And BGP, in this case, and in the case of the Network Plus exam, and in the case, generally speaking, of what's going on in the world, BGP will probably be one of the most common ones that you will run into. And you'll find that's probably what you're using on your network to connect to the network if you're connecting and using a dynamic routing protocol. So for those of you that answered this one, BGP, the option A, 53% of you chose that one. You got it absolutely right. Well done with that. 21% of you said OSPF. That is an interior gateway protocol, not an exterior gateway protocol. We have all of these other protocols that are listed are not routing protocols. So 12% said SSL, secure sockets layers. That's not a routing protocol, certainly not an EGP. 9% said SMTP, simple mail transfer protocols, an application level protocol that has nothing to do with exterior routing either. And 5% said MAC, media access control, which I guess would be one way that you could say MAC. This was MAC, all uppercase letters. So we really were referring to a media access control address, which also has very little to do with an exterior gateway protocol. So if you did answer A, that was really the only good answer that you could choose from. BGP, well done. Let's do another question. I've got kind of a visual daily double we could do, although I can't say that because that's a trademark of another question and answer, isn't it? So here's your visual question of the month. What connector is this? What connector is this? And one of the things, I guess we could even qualify this as a performance-based question, because I'm not giving you multiple choices for this one. You've got to figure this one out yourself. This is one where it is a fill in the blank. This Network Plus exam today does not have any fill in the blank questions on it that I have heard of or seen. And so I don't think that's one you have to necessarily worry about. There are other CompTIA exams that do have multiple choice questions in them. So in our case, this is or a fill in the blank question. But I think, for instance, Linux Plus, the version that's out today, has fill in the blank questions. I want you to fill in the blank, though. So go to professormesser.com/QA. Please don't answer in the chat room. Please don't put any hints in the chat room. This is one where you need to be able to see visually and recognize these types of connectors. You're going to run into all kinds of different connectors in networking. You will constantly run into connectors you're looking at and wondering, what in the world is this thing? There are so many different kinds of network connections that there's no way you're going to be able to memorize all of them. It's just constant to be able to make that work. The name for the Socrative room, you can go to professormesser.com/QA, or you can, from your app, Go to the room, Professor Messer, all one word, PROFESSORMESSER, all lowercase, and that'll get you into where you need to be. I guess it's all lowercase. That's the way I put it in there. Who knows if it is or not? Maybe that's a good way to do it. This is certainly one of the connectors you do need to know for the exam. So make sure you're familiar with those and have all of those things ready. Whenever I start looking at the different connectors, fortunately, the Network Plus exam, I think it might even have a smaller, a different number of connectors on the exam than it had in previous versions. So it may be a little bit easier now on the NTN 007 than it ever was. This is one that I guess you could do a reverse lookup on this one. I bet 10i would get you that, but please don't do that. You want to instead try to take a guess at it yourself. And as I look through the answers, I'm just going to scan through these to see what's there. Some of you are saying, I don't know, just unsure. And that's fine too. We're going to learn in a moment exactly what it is. Some of you are saying digital audio. It is not. Some of you are saying fiber, which is true, but a little broad. I need to be a little more specific than fiber. Make sure you're telling me which connector is that. I want to know the name of that connector. Some of you are saying LC. Some of you are saying MPO. Some of you are saying MTRJ. Some of you are saying other things in here. I don't know. Some kind of fiber? Well, you were right on that. Some of you that did say, what in the world is that? Some kind of fiber did get 0 credit, but you are technically right. That is a fiber connection to have all of these here. Fortunately, there's only like 4 different fiber connections you need to know to have those here. This particular fiber connector, though, is an MTRJ. This is Mechanical Transfer Register Jack. Some people will also call this a Media Termination Recommended Jack. Neither one of those makes any sense to me. I don't like any of those examples. I think of it more as the RJ connectors we use with copper. This has kind of the same feel, almost the same connection size as an RJ45 connector. So I remember MTRJ that way. One of the things I like about this one, you can almost see it on here. At the end of the connector are the 2 fibers. So most times you're plugging in a fiber connection. One of the fiber connections is the send and the other one is the receive. And I know there are different ways that you could send data across those. That's not always the case any longer. Some type of fiber connectors can send and receive over the same individual fiber, but for the vast majority of these you're going to look at. That's where you run into those and be able to work through all of those different pieces. So that's where you just plug in one connection and you've already got both fibers in there, which makes it really simple. You don't mix them up. You don't think maybe you stuck the receive onto the transmit and the transmit onto the receive, which is what happens all the time as well. That's this one makes it very easy to be able to plug in one simple connection, and you have both of those there in the MTRJ connector. A lot of you did very well in that. Some of you did admit you did indeed cheat, and you went to look what that one happened to be. Well, now you don't have to cheat anymore. Now, if you get that on the exam, you'll know exactly what connector that happens to be. Well, how are you supposed to keep track of all these different connectors anyway? There are so many different things you need to know for this exam, and that's why I took all of the important information from every single one of my videos and I put them into my course notes. So if you've missed some of my videos, weren't able to watch all of them, or maybe you would like to have a list of all of these pictures, all of the diagrams that I create, and all of the text from every single one of my videos, this is where you can find it in my Network Plus course notes. Everything is in there from every video. So if you're someone who likes to take your own notes and you're very good at taking very detailed notes, maybe you don't need these course notes. If you're somebody like me, where you really can't read what you wrote after you wrote it down 30 seconds ago, maybe these course notes might be helpful for you. You can find these at NPCN or professormesser.com/NPCN7. Find them there. These are the course notes. They are 66 pages long, and you can see here tons of information and all of these, all of the text, all of the details. Why am I looking at 4 different pages? Let's zoom up on one of these so we can at least see what's going on. There's a good example. There's our IGP, BGP breakdown, interior and exterior routing, and I give you all of the text from the videos. So if you're somebody who really would like to have every video. Some people ask me all the time, can I get a copy of the video slides? Well, you don't need them. They're all here. Everything that's on those slides, I stuck in here. So if you're doing anything relating to IP addressing, distributed switching, binary math, every slide, it's all numbered as well. So these are all 1.3 network address translation, 1.3 access control list. They match the videos. So you can go video by video by video, and you'll see everything that's there. And perhaps more importantly, this is what keeps all of these things going. All of my videos are free to watch. But some of you have even mentioned to me, can I contribute to the site? Well, don't take donations. I want to give you something for that money that you're spending, and I think this is a great way to do it. If you'd like to help contribute and keep things going, you might want to consider this as well. It's only $20, and it is a 66-page book. In fact, let me show you, I even have a physical version of it. So if you get the physical version, which costs a little bit more because we have to print it on dead trees, and we have to send it to you in the mail. But if you do buy the physical version, you also get the digital version for free. So you can download it immediately. But it's exactly the same information. It's the same text. It's the same book. It's just in a physical form. I did this because Mrs. Professor Messer says she likes to read a physical book sometimes. She wants the actual book in front of her so she can make notes and she can really read it wherever she happens to be. And so I've given you the best of both worlds. If you'd like something physical, you're able to get the physical one. You can find out all about that at professormesser.com/NPCN7. You can also find this from the Network Plus section on my website or from the pull down menus that are there as well. Thank you so much for your ongoing support with this as well. It really does go a very long way to keep everything running. This is only exceeded by the next question that we're going to do. Thanks everyone also for that support. Let's do another question though. System administrator needs management access to a router at a remote site when the primary network connection is not available. Which of these would be the best choice for this requirement? A system administrator needs management access to a router at a remote site when the primary network connection is not available. Which of these would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be A, DTLS VPN? Would it be B, TFTP server? Would it be C, web-based management console? Would it be D, secure shell? Would it be E, COM server? So one of those would be the right option if someone is trying to get management access to a router at a remote site when the primary network connection is not available. Is it A, DTLS VPN? Is it B, TFTP server? Is it C, web-based management console? Is it D, secure shell? Is it E, COM server? Well, which one is that? If you think you know the answer, don't answer in the chat room. Go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer right there in Socrative in real time. Unless, of course, you're watching this on a replay, in which case that's not there. So I apologize. You have to be here live. If you're ever trying to figure out when's the next live event, you can always go to professormesser.com/calendar or choose the calendar link that's up at the top of the page, and you'll, of course, be able to do that as well. Yes, I agree. The book that Mrs. Professor Messer makes me print out, she doesn't make me, but it was her idea. So she's the smart one, by the way, in the family. She is absolutely correct. This is nice, high-quality paper. It is a nice, perfect bound book. This is not like a spiral binding. This is like a real book. So this, I really like it, and I really like the quality of the book as well. So thank you for those comments in the chat room. Would not do it any other way to have that. This is not a Network Plus book, by the way. This doesn't replace my videos. It doesn't replace a good textbook. This is simply, as the name tells you, it's my course notes. It's literally notes from my course. So you want to have a really good book. You want to have some good videos. You want some good questions and answers. You need some good hands-on. Those are your 4 things you really need. And hopefully this set of course notes is what goes along with watching those videos, so you can have those available as well. Makes sense to me to have all of that. So let's see how we did with this question, though. A system administrator needs management access to a router or remote site when the primary network connection is not available. Which of these would be the best choice for this requirement? We're not sure. We just don't know. We've got a lot of options here. So 32% of us said D, secure shell. 25 and 24%, almost a tie for second, said A, DTLS VPN, or C, web-based management console. 12% said E, COM server, and 8% said B, TFTP server. Now, for those of you that have set up remote sites, you've had to make sure that you've got connectivity to those remote sites, even when the main connection isn't available, because that's usually when you've got to connect to that site to be able to get in. We're almost always using a modem, just a traditional POTS, plain old telephone system phone line. We're plugging in a plain phone line into a modem and connecting it not directly to a device, because usually at these sites we've got a firewall, we've got a router, we've got individual switches, we've got wireless access points, we have many different devices. So we will dial into a single device, and from that single device we will hop around on the serial management port to all of those other devices. And that's what we call out-of-band management. When we are connecting to all of these devices over a connection that's not on the normal network, it's out of band. An in-band connection is if we were connecting over the existing connected Ethernet interface that has an IP address. But we don't always have that, because sometimes there's a hurricane that comes through and suddenly we no longer have a wide area network connection to that site. We only have serial connectivity to those devices, usually with a 9-pin serial connection like this one here, although these days some of your more modern devices might simply have a USB connection on there. So we're connecting up a modem to our network to manage that device, but instead of connecting directly to the device, we connect to a COM server. You might also hear this referred to as a console router. So this is where we can dial up to one connection and then hop around to other devices depending on what we might want to connect to. So that's whenever I try to start figuring out those details, make sure that you understand what you're going to run into on this exam too. And this is kind of a practical question. It's one that we run into all the time and have these connectivities. But every single one of those different options was a real thing. But why don't they apply in this particular example? Because our question really talked about needing management access to the router when you don't have a normal primary network connection. So let's step through each one of these. We know, for example, in our case, 12% of you that chose E, COM server, that was the correct answer. So only 12% of us got that one right. But why isn't it one of the other answers that are here? Web-based management console, or let's do 32%. 32% of you said secure shell. And secure shell would be a great way to connect to these devices if you were connecting over an Ethernet connection. With secure shell, we simply tell SSH, please connect to this particular IP address. But because the primary network connection isn't available, there's no IP address to connect to, secure shell would not be the right answer. 25% said a web-based management console, same problem. We really didn't have an example there to choose from. We don't have an IP address, so we can't connect to a web front end. 24% said a DTLS VPN, which is a VPN that uses UDP primarily to communicate. But it's a VPN type of connectivity that you would still need to be able to connect with an IP address. And in our particular case, there is no IP address. And lastly, a TFTP server, same scenario. TFTP communicates over IP. We don't have IP. What are we going to do? We're going to connect to the COM server, simply dial up with the type of terminal connection that we're going to use and use that COM server connection to be able to communicate over that standard wired dial-up, something that we don't even consider being used anymore. And in fact, from a networking perspective, we use it all the time. So those of you in the chat room asking about these COM servers, that's exactly what it does. We connect over this modem to the COM server, and the COM server has escape commands or menu options that allows us to then connect from the COM server over serial connections. Usually the back of the COM server may have 8 or 16 different serial ports on it, and we can simply connect all of our different devices there. So that makes sense, to be able to have all of that connectivity we need over that single modem line, which is going to be very low bandwidth, but we only really need a terminal front end to be able to do that. So that is the answer. COM server, unfortunately, very low number of folks, but now this is the benefit, of course. Now you know. If this question with out-of-band communication or being able to connect to devices ever comes up, and it's mentioning a COM server, you'll know exactly what they're talking about on the exam. Let's go through another question. I'm going to have to quickly cycle back through my out-of-band management. I've got another question here we can do because we still have some time left. The question here is about the accounting department. That darn accounting department. They have another problem. They have a user in the accounting department is complaining of constant disconnections from the wireless network. Which of these attack types would be the most likely cause of this issue? Would it be A, man-in-the-middle attack? Would it be B, DNS poisoning? Would it be C, war driving? Would it be D, wireless deauthentication? Or would it be E, brute force attack? One of those would be probably the most likely cause of this issue. Now, what's interesting about this question is there are a few possible answers here. But you will find this on the exam as well, that there may be a few possible answers on here, but the question's very specific. A user in the accounting department is complaining of constant disconnections from the wireless network. Which of these attack types would be the most likely cause of this issue? So you have to be able to know what the most likely cause of this issue happens to be, because every single one of these could potentially cause this issue. Not really. Well, maybe it could. But you may see certainly more than one answer that could technically be the right answer, but that wasn't what they asked. They asked which would most likely cause this issue. So make sure that you work through those and being able to figure out the details of what it might be. Obviously, these are 5 very, very specific attack types. These are real attacks. So I've got 5 real attacks here, but which one of these 5 real attacks would be causing the problem we happen to see? Because all 5 of those could be doing different things. Make sure you know. Make sure you think you know. Now, if you know the answer, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you can answer there. Please no answers in the chat room. And certainly don't give anybody any hints in the chat room of what it might be. We want to see if we can all figure out together what it might be. And in fact, you might not even have the right answer, as it turns out, if you go through the details and figure out all of those different pieces of it. That's where I start to break out, what could it be? What type is this? Maybe you've already run into some of these attack types before. I give examples of these in my videos. I tried in some cases to even show you some of these attacks in real time. So there might be something you can work with there. That might be something you can go back through the video and see what was the method used for that particular attack type. Well, we've got some answers that have come in. So let's see how we did with this one. A user in the accounting department complaining of constant disconnections from the wireless network. Which of these attack types would be the most likely cause of this issue? And you can see with D, wireless deauthentication, got 59% of the vote. But we have a tie for second between A, man-in-the-middle attack, and B, DNS poisoning. We can see that 9% said brute force attack and 2% said war driving. Well, in this case, we wanted to really focus on the question. It's very important we focus on the question when looking through these. So we know that the problems we see in this question are constant disconnections, a wireless network. The accounting department, it could be any department. But we're giving a very specific set of issues here. So even some of you in the chat room said it could be a number of different things. Yes, it could, but that wasn't the question. The question said which of these attack types could be causing this issue. Because it could be other things other than these 5 things that you get to choose from, but it's not one of those. You only have 5 options. So that's the one where you really have to step through here and figure out what am I going to deal with here. One of these issues that we're dealing with here is it's a normal day. You're surfing the wireless network. You're on it. Everything's working. And then suddenly you're not on the network anymore. And then maybe it comes back and you're able to work some more and then it goes away again. Or maybe it drops you off of the wireless network and that's it. You're never getting back on the wireless network. It just never shows up again. You never get access to this. And one of the common ways for that to happen is for somebody performing a wireless deauthentication attack. You might also hear this referred to as a wireless disassociation attack. This is a wireless denial of service and is one that can create a significant problem on your wireless network. This is from my N10007 video number 4.4 called Wireless Deauthentication. And in that wireless deauthentication video, I show you in real time a device, take my iPhone, and I use another machine to knock that iPhone off the network, and it just doesn't come back. You can set it up so it never comes out of there with the wireless deauthentication. I show you the exact packet types. I show you the details of how I did it so that you could even recreate it yourself with the exact same tools that I used to be able to make that happen. And when it happens, it's a bad thing. And of course, in the video, I explain ways that you could prevent this from happening on your network as well. It is a very, very nasty type of attack that can absolutely take people off the wireless network and leave them off the wireless network. And that can be a problem for everybody. So if you did answer D, wireless deauthentication, that was the correct answer. 60% of you did get that one absolutely right. Now, why would it not be a man-in-the-middle attack? A man-in-the-middle attack is not really planning to knock you off of the wireless network. That's not its primary goal. In fact, it's rarely the goal of a man-in-the-middle attack. You want to be in the middle of that communication so you can see what's going back and forth. Knocking you off of the network defeats the whole purpose of being in the middle of your connection. So that's probably not going to be the most likely cause of this particular issue. DNS poisoning. DNS poisoning is one where you're changing IP addresses on the DNS server or changing the resolution that people are getting when they query a particular name or IP address. Usually it's pointing you to another device. It's not taking you off the wireless network. It's simply moving you over to a different connection. 8% of you said E, brute force attack. A brute force attack is one where somebody's constantly trying perhaps usernames, trying to log in as someone else. That wouldn't cause somebody else on the network to simply lose connectivity to the network, however. And 2, war driving. War driving is where you can simply drive around, bicycle around, go around your area and find out where all the wireless networks are. It doesn't take people off the network. It's more of a reconnaissance type scenario to have that there. And some of you in the chat room are even saying, this doesn't sound very familiar. You're absolutely right. This is a topic that is new on the N10007. That's why I mentioned why it's so important that you have all of the latest study materials. If you have books that say N10006, they're outdated. If you have any study material that says N10006, it's outdated. The latest version is the N10007. Make sure you have the N10007 exam objectives and make sure that all of your study materials are clearly marked as N10007 or you're never, ever, ever going to know about this particular topic. Very important that you have those. On the N10006 to 007, probably 30%, just over 30% of the topics are brand new. So a third of the exam is brand new. So make sure you have all of the details with that. If you are watching this video for continuing education credit and you would like to get a 1-hour webinar category of CEU, I'll send you an email that says you must have watched this. Here's what you do. You go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website. You go to the Contact Us link that's there. In that Contact Us link, give me your name, your email address. That's how I get this back to you. And somewhere in there, mention that this is the October 2018 Network Plus Study Group. And in that message, I'm reading through these. So this is a manual process for me to do this. So you can put anything you'd like in there. If you'd like to put a message to me, you're more than welcome to. I like to read them. You can put a message, but somewhere in there, mention that you're getting the CEU credit for wireless deauthentication. That's your super secret code word of the month, wireless deauthentication. And that way, you will be able to, I will be able to know that you really did watch this, or at least this part of it, and having this here, and all of those that are here. So make sure that you are able to follow those instructions, because those instructions are part of you receiving the CEU. Top or the bottom of my website, click the Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, October 2018 Network Plus Study Group, and the word in there somewhere, or words, wireless deauthentication. So it's in there somewhere. And I will send you back, usually in about a week, send you back an email that says, you must have watched this. Thank you so much. You're super awesome. And I digitally sign it with my private key. So you aren't able to change 1 hour to 10 hours. See, I'm already thinking about that. We've got time for another question, though. We're not done yet. We got more to do. I've got another question here for you. So let's do another one. This question is for all you system administrators. So here is your question, your next question, which asks, A system administrator would like to restrict all inbound sessions to a database server except for subnet in the data center. Which of these tools would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be A, netstat? Would it be B, IP tables? Would it be C, TCP dump? Would it be D, route? Or would it be E, path ping? So a system administrator would like to restrict all inbound sessions to a database server except for a subnet in the data center. Which of these tools would be the best choice for this requirement? Would it be A, netstat? Would it be B, IP tables? Would it be C, TCP dump? Would it be D, route? Or would it be E, path ping? You think you know the answer? You can go to professormesser.com/QA. You can, of course, work through all of those, have the details. Make sure that you go through and read every single one of those and have those as well. There's plenty of things that you could step through with these particular answers, but it really only one of these is going to be the best choice for this requirement. Make sure you know as well to be able to step through all of those details. I think that would be a great way to know all of them, because all 5 of these answers are real tools. They're real things. I didn't make up any one of those. So make sure you know what real tool you should be using to be able to answer this one. A number of you are going through and you're Googling them, I can tell. I look at the numbers as they're going up on my side, and I can see what people are trying to do. And that's one of the ones where I notice, okay, some of you may not know what some of these are. In fact, some of these tools are new to the N10007. So we're really looking at a lot of new topics here this time to have all of these pieces available. Make sure that you're aware of those as well. In the chat room, some of you are mentioning you're not able to get to the live video because you're at work and they're blocking it. But of course, live replays or not live replays, I guess not, that would be a good one. It's a live replay. The replay of this live event is available immediately afterwards. Once we close out the study group, then just a few minutes later, it's available for everyone to watch. So you've got different things that you could use to be able to access this after the fact. So once you get home, maybe you're on your drive, you'll be able to have those available to watch on the replay. Let's see how we did with this particular question and because this is one you run into all the time. This is a very common requirement. So a system administrator has a database server, but they don't want anybody accessing that database server except other devices in the data center. That's an extremely common use case in security, because you don't want people from outside of that data center having access to that database server. So which of these tools would be the best choice for this requirement? Well, we have, again, we're sort of mixed. 47% said B, IP tables. 26% of you said D, route. We have a tie for third. 12% said netstat and 11% said TCP dump. And then the last one, as 5% said path ping, which was option E. Now, if we went with not the majority, but the largest number here, 47% said IP tables, is that the one we really should be using to set up this type of restriction? And indeed, it absolutely is. IP tables is a firewall that is built into Linux. This is very commonly called the Linux IP tables. It is on a device, it's on a server. So if you're on a database server, you could configure a firewall rule in IP tables that will restrict access by IP address, by port number, by a range of those. You could say that only access to the ingress or access egress. You've got a lot of different options available with IP tables. It's a very functional type of firewall. The Linux distribution you're using may not be using IP tables. This is what you run into with Linux. We mentioned this earlier, is some Linux versions use different applications or different tools than others. For example, if you're on professormesser.com, I'm using a Linux distribution that uses Firewall D. If you are on other websites or other Linux servers, their distribution may be using IP tables, but the functionality is generally the same, where you're able to allow or disallow access to the device based on a number of different criteria or tuples. These tuples could be an IP address, a port, an application, could even be content. You could say just HTTP type traffic, and it's looking for that type of traffic to come through. So in our case, IP tables is what would happen to be able to make that work. IP tables is your option B. 48% of you, the most number of you, did choose B, IP tables. It would not be Netstat. Netstat could show us what's connecting to our server, and it might even show us routing tables. Netstat's a very capable and very functional tool, but it doesn't restrict any access to the device. It doesn't allow us to filter out anything. It's simply showing us what's happening. TCP dump's a great tool, but it's really only designed to capture traffic. So being able to see the traffic is interesting, but in this particular question, we're trying to block traffic. And TCP dump is not going to block traffic either. We have the route command, which allows us to set static routes on our device and to view the routes that our device is using. And this would allow us to determine where traffic is going and redirect what router we happen to be using, but it doesn't filter any traffic. It's simply sending traffic to the destination that we choose. And finally, path ping, 5% of you chose path ping. And path ping is an interesting tool to use in a Windows operating system, which is kind of a combination of a trace route and a ping in the same utility. It's actually much worse than that. But it is something you still need to know for your Network Plus exam. And of course, I stuck it in there, this particular question. It's a real tool, and it does have some functionality associated with it. I do a demonstration of that in our tools video as well, command line tools number 5.2. In this case, the correct answer is indeed IP tables. That is the right answer. If you're someone who's trying to set up a filter on your Linux device, I have plenty of filters on mine. I have multiple sets of filters on the entire path between you and my web server. Trust me. There's a lot of security there for many good reasons. All of these questions, by the way, this last hour of Q&A that we've been doing, all comes directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. Make sure you have a copy of those exam objectives. You have plenty of detail in here. This is just the first 2 pages of it. And look at the detail that's in those exam objectives. That should be the first thing you download when you start your studies. It should be your checklist that you use as you're going through all of your studies. It should be the last thing you go through before walking into your exam room to make sure you really have covered every topic from the exam. People ask me all the time, what do I really need to know for my Network Plus exam? What topics are really the most important? Everything that's in this list. And it is a comprehensive list. Make sure you know. And have all of those details that are there. That's one where it becomes useful to have all that information available at your fingertips, and you should absolutely take advantage of that. Well, assuming there's not going to be another hurricane anytime soon, our plan is to have another one of these Network Plus study groups on November the 14th. So make sure that you come back for that one. Next week, of course, is our Security Plus study group. And then next in November, on November the 14th, we'll have the Network Plus study group. If this is after November the 14th, or you would like to attend any of our live events, you can always go to our calendar, which is a calendar link on the front page of our site, or simply go to professormesser.com/calendar, and you'll be able to know exactly when that next event is going to be. Stick around for the next hour. I'm just going to open up phone lines. It's our after show. I like to be able to answer almost any question from the chat room, from the phone lines, whatever you'd like to ask. It can be about Network Plus. It can be about certifications in general. It can be about careers. It could be about the next global event in the division, which is happening on October the 22nd. It's the blackout. Not that I'm expecting that. Not that I'm looking forward to that. That's what's going on. But the formal Q&A for the day is over. And if you're following me on Twitter, you already know that you get a free Q&A for Network Plus every Tuesday. You can follow along as well at professormesser.com/Twitter. And don't forget to subscribe on YouTube. It's such a simple thing. You'll never know what happened. It helps me so much. And you hear that all the time from YouTube content creators, and that's because it is so valuable to us to help us with our friends at Google and YouTube to keep everything going on our site. Don't forget about the course notes, professormesser.com/NPCN. Get the course notes there. And of course, go to the calendar. You'll know when the next one of these is going to be. Thanks for joining us this time. Stick around for the next hour. We'll do some Q&A. Otherwise, we will see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group. Bing, bing, bing. Okay, we're back. We're back. That was a great Q&A. I think we might have even learned something this month. Well, maybe not. Maybe we did. I did. Whenever I'm putting together the questions is when I really start being able to do that and having those there. Well, you guys are really going into detail about static routes in DHCP, which nobody does, by the way. Nobody sets up their static routes in DHCP. I guess some people must, or else it wouldn't be there, right? Somebody does. Saying that nobody does is not correct. It's only kind of correct. It's mostly correct. Let me get my show going here. I'm coughing, trying to keep things together. This is the after show. I'll take questions from the chat room. We'll take questions on dial-in. You will call me on the telephone, and you can ask questions of me. You can also Skype in. I'll explain how to do all of that in just a moment. Let's see if I can call in myself, because that's the important part, is me being able to call in and being able to do the exact same thing. Let's see if I can. It'll make some beeping noises here, and it says, "Thank you." Well, you're welcome. And then I have to type in a thing here on my side. I have to call into my own show. It's all in the cloud, everyone. And it says,
"Enter your 6-digit PIN number."
Again, very redundant. I will type in my 6-digit PIN number, and it says,
"Welcome."
Well, there you go. I am there, which means you're there. Let's see if I can bring this up on the screen properly. There we go. Now you're there. If you would like to call in, you're more than welcome to. I am taking questions from the chat room, so you don't have to call in at all. You go to professormesser.com/live. I've been watching the chat room go by the whole time. You can, of course, ask questions in there, and I'll be answering some in just a moment. You can also, from anywhere in the continental United States, call in with a telephone. 855-785-RJ45 will get you there. That number again, 855-785-7545. If you're on Skype, you can call in for free anywhere in the world. No Skype minutes needed. With a +1 at the beginning, you put in +1 855-785-7545, and you can call in with that also. Have that there. Grayson is not the only one in the chat room who uses static routes in his home network. Extensive static routing in my home network, because I've got a crazy network set up with, I'm up to, it's not super crazy. I think there's only 5 VLANs. It's not nuts. It's got separate things going on. 3 of those VLANs are in my studio, and 2 of those VLANs are really 4 of those VLANs. One of those VLANs is shared between my studio and my house, and one of those VLANs is my house. So, and I have multiple routers that I'm using to access the internet. So if I need to, in my studio, access my house, I have to set a static route on my device that's here. So instead of going to my normal internet router, I can go directly to my house router so I can access services that are in the house. Because there's a lot going on here. There's different systems. I've got the laptop here. I've got my primary iMac in front of me. I've got a Windows-based video switcher here. There's a TV here that you can barely see the bottom of in that picture, but it's up in front of me. So there's a lot of stuff there that's going on. So I have to have all these here. And I think they're all working now. Of course, when you shut things down, that's when you really find out if you configure things properly. And this past week, as I mentioned, we had Hurricane Michael come through. Wednesday, about 2 o'clock, I lost power a week ago. And the power did not come on until Monday morning. So 5 days later, we went through the weekend. We just sat in the house. Not all the time, because once things started powering up, the town was basically out of service Thursday morning. There was no power anywhere. Massive trees came down. I probably have a picture of my backyard I can show you, just so you got a feel for exactly what was going on. Let's click some things on my screen here and just give you a perspective of, well, there's a lot that's here that's a mess. I've got big trees that were down. I'm trying to find just one good one I can show you to get this here, but there was no power anywhere in town that day. They basically, after the hurricane comes through, that very first day is where you can't get through the streets because all of the trees are down. And if a tree isn't down, then a wire is down. And you really don't want to hit an electrical wire on the street. So nobody goes anywhere the first day except people that you need to access those particular areas. You need all of the people that are handling all of your all of the systems on your for power, for cable, the police. All of those need to be out. We don't need to be. But as the weekend went on, as we went through Thursday, Friday, by Saturday and Sunday, you started to see shops and places open. So one of the things that opened up was the movie theater, had air conditioning, killed some good time. So got the whole family. We went to see a movie. We left our sweltering home and went to see the movies. And then we would come back to our sweltering house and sleep at night in 85 and 90 degree weathers, trying to sleep in that. But finally, on Monday, we got some power. And that's when I realized, well, we might be able to do this study group today and being able to have those things there and the details. So that's why really wasn't quite sure. Obviously, last week, that's why we didn't have a study group. That's why everything got pushed. If you showed up and you thought, why are we having a study group today? Well, that's because it got canceled and got moved. And although I changed it in the calendar, we're all just very accustomed to showing up on Wednesday and doing a study group. So I apologize I wasn't available. But at least now I am available and we can do that. And we do have some people that are calling in on the phone lines. And so far I am up and running and can do that. So let's go to this first call. I want to make sure we're potted up here so I can hear the caller in the 808 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Caller. I heard it go beep, so you've got to be there.
Hello.
Hello.
My name is Eleanor, and I'm calling from Santa Barbara.
Hello, Eleanor. Thank you for calling. What can we do for you today?
I just want to listen to the show and learn.
Well, you've come to the right place for that. You can, of course, watch it live. We're all watching the live stream at professormesser.com/live. We've also got people that, after the fact, can watch on the replay. I think I mentioned earlier, as soon as I finish up the study group, just for other people's reference, you can always watch the replays, and all of the replays are available to watch on my website as well. So you can go back years, and for some reason, you may want to step through and watch those as well. I've tried to put links on there on the list of the other pieces. Are you studying also for your Network Plus exam, Eleanor?
Yes, sir. This is my first year in cybersecurity. I'm at City College in Santa Barbara.
Well, you're doing the right thing. There was someone, I think it was the August study group, and it may have been on the Security Plus study group, that one of the first callers was mentioning, and I couldn't agree more, and I've said it for years, is that if you're planning to get into IT security, you need a very strong foundation in networking. A lot of what you're going to be doing on the security side is based on things you need to know on the network. Whether you're setting up a VPN, you're configuring a SIM, you're setting up a firewall on the network, you're setting up a redundant set of firewalls and integrating that with your existing switches and routers. Almost all of that has a need for understanding what's happening at the packet level. So going through the Network Plus and learning these things is an incredibly valuable thing, especially if you're planning to get into security.
Yes, sir. Great. Thank you.
Do you have any questions for us, Eleanor, that may be specific to what you're going through with the Network Plus?
Not specific. I mean, it's so much, but I thought I would just listen and learn.
Well, I'll give you my major tip, and it was the tip I gave kind of at the end of the study group, and I don't mention it enough, and I didn't show it on the screen. So as I'm mentioning it to you, I'm going to pull up a list of the CompTIA exam objectives, because they are really the beginning and end of where you should be studying for your exam. The set that I have. Let me view them on my screen in a 2-page mode so we can really look at these. I think the version I have is the Intent 007 version 4.0, but there may be a newer version available than what I have. And what's important with these, I've already color-coded mine. So those of you that are looking at it on the screen, you're seeing a lot of colors there because I color-code what was on the old exam and what's on the new exam as I'm going through these things. But you'll see just a lot of detail. In fact, the exam objectives are 19 pages long, including a list of acronyms and a list of hardware and software in the back. But it's a very good place where you can go. In fact, let's look at just the first section, networking concepts. Section 1.1 asks you to explain the purposes and uses of ports and protocols. A lot of people will say, well, what types of ports and protocols do I need to know? Well, they're listed right here. I've had people come to me and say, I can't remember this 150 ports and protocols that I got off the internet. And I said, well, you only need to know 25 or so of those. You don't need to know 150. But some people don't realize this exam objectives has this list that shows exactly what that list happens to be. And you can see that it has SSH is 22, DNS is 53, SMTP is 25, and so on. And that's why when you go to my videos, I go through each one of those individually as to not only what the port number is, but I explain to you, as the exam objectives say, the purposes and uses of those ports and protocols. Don't be trapped in this scenario where you're simply memorizing that SSH goes with 22 and you're not understanding what SSH actually is. So if I had to give you a tip, Eleanor, that's the tip I would give you. I think that will take you far as you're going through your Network Plus studies.
All right. Thank you. That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Eleanor. Appreciate you calling, and best of luck with those Network Plus studies. I think that if you're planning to go through A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, or anything else, that's what you should focus on, is what's listed in those exam objectives. Back to the phone lines. Let's go to the 252 area code. Hello, caller. Welcome. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi there, Professor. My name is Bill, and I'm physically in Kodiak, Alaska.
Nice. So what can we do for you, Bill?
Yes, sir. Well, my question is an Outlook question, not Microsoft Outlook, but I'm coming from the Cisco world. I passed the CCENT earlier this year, and I've worked with Cisco networking equipment for the better part of 6 years now. I'm just now tackling my Network Plus. What I can see is that where Cisco is very deep, it looks like CompTIA's Network Plus is just a very wide array of topics. What would you say to someone like me to try to get a better mindset to try to understand this material with just how wide the area of study is?
This is a more common question than you might think, because for some reason online, for whatever reason, a lot of places tend to combine or compare Network Plus and the CCENT from Cisco. And as you've already found, those are effectively two completely different certifications. Some of the topics look like they're similar, but you can tell very obviously that they were two certifications designed for two different kinds of focus and two different kinds of needs. And so some people will say, well, just skip over Network Plus, go straight to CCENT. But you've already taken your CCENT, and you know that the CCENT goes way beyond the Network Plus exam objectives. And so there's more of a graduated view between these two certifications. You'll find the Network Plus is sort of your intro to CCENT, and CCENT takes you the rest of the way. For example, in the Network Plus exam, you need to understand what, let me take a topic from the CCENT. You need to understand how a switch works. You need to understand the fundamentals of MAC addresses being sent to a switch, the switch having a lookup table, and then the switch determining where to send that traffic based on the MAC address. On the Network Plus world, that's all you need to know. On the CCENT, you need to be able to turn on a switch, configure it from its initial configuration, define your VLANs, set up the management IP address on that switch, configure and plug in devices to that switch, connect multiple switches together, connect them with routers, connect them over wide area networks, and then be able to manage and troubleshoot those types of connections at the command line. What a very different world the CCENT goes into versus the Network Plus. So they aren't any way similar in being able to take the different perspectives of topics. They sort of cover similar words in the exam objectives, but the scope is so much broader in the CCENT. So now that you've already taken the CCENT, you should be able to step through the Network Plus relatively easy. There are some topics in the Network Plus that are not covered in the CCENT because the CCENT goes into such detail. So things like spanning tree, I believe, are in the next exam that you would take, the separate routing and switching exam that's after that, the ICND 2. But you don't even get a big overview of spanning tree in the ICND 1 or the CCENT certification exam. Other topics like VPNs aren't covered extensively in the CCENT. So you may have to do a little bit of study, very broad study on those particular topics that aren't covered. But for the most part, you should be relatively solid with much of the topics on the Network Plus exam. You probably already know, for instance, that the CCENT, you needed to be able to subnet very, very quickly. There's tons of subnetting questions on that exam. You're expected to be able to do this in your head or very quickly on a sheet of paper, whereas with Network Plus, you might not get any subnetting questions on the exam. So the scope, as you've already seen, scope extremely different. But if you're someone who's already gone through the CCENT, I really don't expect you'll have much problem with the little overview and being able to take that Network Plus exam. Did I lose you, Bill? Is Bill tired of me talking? That's very possible. But that's if you're ever trying to figure out, Bill did drop off, but if you're ever trying to figure out which one of these do I take, the real question starts before you start studying. So you need to understand, what do you want to do? Do you want to become someone who is going to be a network administrator? Maybe you'll jump over the Network Plus exam because you're going to get a lot of those topics from Network Plus in those CCENT and even the ICND2 exam. Those things might be worth skipping over. You've still got to learn them, which means you've still got to spend the time learning all that information. It's not like you don't have to learn it, but you'll have to learn it during your ICND1/CCENT studies. If you're somebody, though, is just trying to get your foot in the door, you're just trying to get a help desk position, you just want to, from there, figure out where you're going to go next, Network Plus is a much better fit. Most people are not going to hire someone who is a Cisco CCNA routing and switching certified person for their help desk because they'll simply assume they can't afford you. You're somebody who already learned something that's beyond the scope of what you're going to be doing day to day. You'll be bored sitting at the help desk. You really should be looking for a network administration position. So those are the things that, and quite honestly, make sure that you go through all of the different things that you need to know for a particular job. Look at what they're asking for. If they're asking for Network Plus, you'll know exactly what you need to take. If they're asking for CCENT certification, then you know those as well. So sometimes it's not up to you. Sometimes it's up to the hiring manager as well. Let's go to the 661 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? 661. Are you there, caller? Caller. I'm definitely got you potted up. You're there. We're waiting for you. Bill in the chat room said he had a horrible voice connection in Kodiak, but I thank him for calling and for following up on that. If 661 isn't there, I'm going to stick you back in the queue so you don't lose your place. And let's go to 832 area code. Hello, caller. Are you there? What's your name? Yeah, maybe the problem's on my side. Maybe I'm not in the room, which is what happened last week. Back to the queue. We're going to see if I can figure out those details. And indeed, it was me that fell off. How would I rate the quality of this call? Skype asks. Well, you don't want to know, Skype, but thank you so much. We're going to call back in so we can keep this going. And indeed, it might have been network connectivity on my side.
Thank you for calling.
Well, you're welcome for me calling. Now I have to type these things in again and type this in and hit a pound sign, and it says,
enter your 6-digit PIN number.
Well, okay. We've done this before, haven't we? And I type in my 6-digit PIN number, and she says,
welcome.
Well, we'll try this again. Now that I'm here, we can go back to the 661 area
Video
code. It's
web
been
interface.
holding for a
Show
while.
recording is on.
Well, thank you. Hello, 661 area code. Are you there? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, it's Kelly, and I'm calling from Sacramento.
We can hear Kelly now. Thank you, Kelly, for holding. Thank you for being patient with that. What can we answer for you today?
Yes, I have a question on the performance concepts in domain 1.3.
Oh, okay. I need my exam objectives.
In there, they discuss 4 different types of concepts. And one of the questions that I had from a practice exam was, which layer do each of these concepts fit in?
This is specifically talking to the traffic shaping, quality of service, DiffServ, and COS, I'm expecting. Yes. Okay.
And by process of elimination, because it was a performance-based question, I was able to satisfy the question. However, I am wondering if you can clarify the real differences between the QoS, the DiffServ, and the COS. I'm beginning to think that the QoS is more like a generalized umbrella for DiffServ and COS.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
That is actually a pretty accurate start with how we put these things into different categories. The challenge we have in the industry is that quality of service is a very broad term used to define some type of prioritization. And there are many, many ways to prioritize traffic on the network, well beyond what is listed in this list in Network Plus, which tends to focus on COS and DiffServ and the DHCP information. In fact, I used to manage and work with firewalls that didn't use any of these technologies to be able to do prioritization of applications. It had its own internal method using buckets and queues to be able to handle how it did all of this. And that's because part of the challenge, as you've already seen, is that there's different ways to do this depending on what device you happen to be using. In my video on this section 1.3, video 14 is prioritizing traffic, I break out the layers for you. So I mention if you're doing, I tell you quality of service is a very broad term of categorization, of setting priorities on what traffic should go before or after other traffic. So if you ever have somebody says, I need to configure QoS, they're really not talking about any specific technology. They're just talking about, I need to put things in some particular order to set priorities so that somebody downloading a file doesn't overwhelm my voice over IP network. And that's really where most of these technologies are going to apply, or at least that's where the popularity of these technologies came from, is that voice over IP is so sensitive to any type of delay or latency that everybody wants voice over IP to have priority and everything else would be second on the list. And that's why you start to see more and more of these QoS questions come up. But in that video, I talk about COS, which is class of service, and that's done at layer 2. And I mentioned OSI layer 2. If you're working with switches, you're working in a trunk connection where there's a lot of different connection going over a trunk, then you could potentially use class of service to make that happen. It's usually one I mentioned in the video that you would only do on the inside of your network. You usually don't see this outside of your network between different organizations. If you move up to layer 3, where you've got IP addresses and you're setting priorities based on layer 3, then you're using differentiated services, or DiffServ is one good way to do that. That is where you're setting bits within the IPv4 header. Obviously, that IPv4 header is not going to be on a switch connection, because the switch is obviously working at layer 2. So I mentioned that if you're working with a router, that's usually where you're setting up DiffServ bits. And you would set up these differentiated services bits, and the definition of what those are is the DHCP, the DSCP, the differentiated services code point. So I try in my video to break those out at a very high level. Obviously, we're not going into the configuration of these. I don't even show the details in Windows of setting up things like class of service or DSCP in Windows. And you should really have to understand more of these if you're planning to implement them. And that's the line I drew early in that last caller, where he has to do things with the Cisco certification. Cisco certifications will have you configuring some of these things. Network Plus, you only need to know the very broad level of where these happen to sit on the network. And in that video, at least I try to break those out for you.
Okay, so if it's a firewall, then would a firewall read the DiffServ?
This is sort of the challenge that we run into in the practical world of doing this, is not all devices understand or are able to act on DiffServ data, on these DSCP bits that have been configured. I worked with a series of firewalls that could see the DiffServ information come in. It could then allow that DiffServ information to pass through, but it had no particular function or action based on the DiffServ bits. So it simply allowed them to pass through the firewall without making any changes whatsoever. That same device, however, allowed you to set priorities at the application level. So really, it was a layer 7 quality of service device that allowed you to set different priorities based on what applications were going through the network, based on an internal set of queues and buckets. Didn't use DiffServ, didn't use class of service, had its own methodology, but it passed that information through just in case on the other side of the firewall you happen to have a router or some other device that was handling the DiffServ bits and doing its own queuing based on what was on the other side, which sometimes does happen.
Okay, so I'm coming to the conclusion that if I am trying to make a firewall that allows voice VoIP as the priority, I've got to go through almost every single layer to make that happen.
Or your firewall needs to be one that can recognize and act on DiffServ.
Okay.
Which doesn't guarantee, it's not guaranteed that's going to be in your firewall, but you would have to find one that could do that.
Well, that was the end of my question. It was satisfied very well. Thank you.
I hope you're able to get through those. It's a good question. It's one you certainly need to know for the exam. So if anybody else is listening in or you're trying to figure out the details, that's your scope. We kind of covered everything in that video right here in that phone call, so that was perfect. Thank you for calling, Kelly.
Thank you.
That's you'll run into those questions also in the Network Plus exam where they want you to put things in different layers, or they'll ask you about those different technologies and ask you what should you be doing to make those layers fit properly into the topic, into the equipment that you have. Here's a router, here's a switch. What do you configure on those for quality of service? Let's go back to the calls. 832. Since I'm still here, I can talk to this caller as well. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name's Eric. I'm in Houston, Texas.
Thanks for calling, Eric. What can we do for you today?
So I am relatively new to the IT industry. I have about 8 months experience in a technical service field, sort of with ISP support.
Okay.
And I have some experience in remote desktop and learning Active Directory on Windows Server 2016.
All good things.
I don't know whether, I don't know whether I want to start with the A plus, the Network Plus, or whether I want to get something like the Security Plus so that I can continue. I don't know where I want to go with it, to be honest.
Well,
problem solving is like, I understand like with networking and cybersecurity, most of it is essentially problem solving and puzzle solving and trying to see what's wrong in any specific area. And I just don't know what would be the best choice of action for like the first thing to get my foot in the door.
One of the advantages you have right now is that you're getting sort of a smattering of everything. You're getting a little bit of operating system. You're getting a little bit of Active Directory. You're getting a little bit of networking in there. There's just a little pinch of security built on top of that. Maybe not a lot of database, but some there. Certainly a good set of server and data center. And on top of all of that, probably a layer of some type of change management and control of all of these things you're working on. So you're starting it to at least feel or get a feel for all of the different options that, or at least a huge number of different options that might be available to you. There should be, in your normal workings, some of those topics probably are more interesting to you than others, because all of those topics I just mentioned, there was what, 6 or 7 or 8 of those. Every single one of those could be a single career for someone. So someone can do networking their entire career. Somebody can do security their entire career. They could do database management. They could do server administration and focus solely on that. And I will tell you, right now at the help desk, it seems very rote. It seems very going through a set of flow charts and doing problem solving and getting the problems done. But once you get a layer or two above the help desk, you find that the problem solving part of it is fading away a little bit more, and you're getting more into architecture, you're getting more into design, you're getting more into ongoing management and monitoring. It's one that gets you out of that. So you're not going to be in the same flow of here's a ticket, find the problem in the ticket, solve the ticket, mark it closed, go to the next one. Once you get past the help desk, which is really where you're getting this broad drinking from the fire hose perspective, once you get above that, it becomes a little more strategic. And so I recommend to people, find the thing you like to do. I started in IT, I really started with hardware and learning how to manage and set up servers, which moved me into operating systems and really understanding everything to know about Windows, which then moved me into server and server administration, which then moved me into networking, which finally moved me into security. So the other thing I'll tell you is that whatever you choose is probably not what you're going to be doing the rest of your career, because this type of crazy world of IT never stays still. It's constantly moving. Everything we know about Facebook and Twitter and virtualization and cloud-based services today is going to be very different 10 years from now. But all of this sort of builds on each other. So this knowledge you get today is going to be very valuable knowledge that you'll get to use for whatever this next thing is going to be. And all you have to do is just let the river take you. You like that side of the river a little more, you're going to paddle over there and spend more time with the networks or spend more times with the servers and build off of those. But you'll find that they all build on each other. And eventually you get to decide how you're going to be flowing through the river and having a little bit more focus on what you like to do and going that direction as well. So my recommendation would be, try to figure out what you like and start focusing more on those topics, and you'll find what happens is more of those opportunities start to show up in networking or in server administration, and then you go to the next thing. It's not the world that my parents had, where you would go on to a job and you would stay there for 25 or 30 years. With IT, we tend to stay somewhere for 2 or 3 years, and then we're off to the next thing. So we also have to let people know when they're getting into IT, there's going to be quite a bit of that. There's a lot of moving. There's a lot of constant career changes. If you're someone who's very adverse to change, this may not be the best world for you to be in, because if you want to move up, you want to have a career that's giving you more opportunity, more of a challenge, and more money, ultimately, you're going to need to move every few years to find that particular place. But it's so gratifying. You're always learning something. You're always not knowing something. Somebody was mentioning to me in the chat earlier, I guess it was a week before, because I didn't have any power last week. They were mentioning, I feel like I never know what's going on. And I said, well, just that's what you're going to be the rest of your life. That's IT. You never know all of the answers. I was a senior systems engineer working with cutting edge firewalls, nothing else in the world like them. I was working with people that were way smarter than me, that knew all there was to know about everything, and none of us knew everything. But we knew we could call the people that were stronger with different things. If I needed to know the intricacies of BGP, there was a guy who I could call for BGP. When somebody wanted to know the details about what's inside of these packets, they knew they could call me. When somebody was wanting to program and set up their own customized application signatures, I knew there was a person I could talk to. So we all had our strengths, but you all had to, one of the best things I did was know when to say, I don't know, which was a lot. And people are concerned that you'll look stupid, but you don't. You're the smart one. You don't pretend that you know what you're talking about. You go, I don't know, but I know somebody who does, and we're going to get them to help us, and then we'll know more when they're done. That's your challenge, is to find those people, network them, have them in your back pocket. You sometimes are working in your company, sometimes are working somewhere else, but don't be afraid that you don't know, because you're never going to know everything. And I think that's half the fun of what we do in IT. You're always learning, and I think that makes for a better career.
Yeah, right. It's like everything's a problem to be solved. So, and that's what it seems like with most of the things that I'm learning right now. And I think most of the things that I'm learning now are going to be able to translate into whatever position. I'm sure help desk will use pretty much all of those. But I think my main concern with all this, because I know in the beginning I'm still going to be too fresh to be even concerned about any of that down the road. But I think that if I just work in basic help desk for a little bit, and then down the road, if I do end up being like a sysadmin or like a network engineer or technician or something like that, or administrator, I find that might be a little too maybe monotonous, or not necessarily what I want out of like problem solving or my career. So then I could go, and I think cybersecurity down the line would be a lot more finding a problem and finding a solution and constantly doing that, right?
It very well could be. It very well could be. In my career, I've probably had 15 different jobs that were IT related in my career. Sometimes I made career changes that were really the right thing to do at that time. Sometimes I made career changes that were real stinkers. And looking back, I'm wondering, what in the world was I thinking? That was a horrible career move. But what was good about it is, even when it's a bad decision, you learn from it. And that's one of those things that you just run into sort of as life. Sometimes you make bad decisions, and those bad decisions are ones you look back and think, what in the world was I thinking? But you don't make those bad decisions again. You do learn from them. So that's my recommendation to you, is follow what those happen to be. Don't limit yourself. There's always going to be things to do. My last, I guess, IT-related job, this is an IT-related job. And back when I started working in IT, I could never guess that I would be streaming live over the internet so that anybody in the world could hear what I had to say, because that technology didn't actually exist yet. So there's things that you're going to be doing later on in your career that you would have had no idea you would be doing, because those technologies haven't been created yet. So my goal, my recommendation for you, my advice is follow those things, even though you may think network administration or server administration is monotonous. It very much is not. Both of those things I always found to be very, very interesting, because there were always things to learn and always things that were different every day when I walked in. But they always gave me a foundation for what to do next. You mentioned wanting to do security. If you're going to do security, you're going to need a very strong foundation in networking. And that's me speaking as someone who was a senior systems engineer for a next generation firewall company for almost 7 years. So I had to have a very solid networking foundation, because everything I did on the security side referred back to all of that. So make sure you get those foundations. You're not going to start in security, but you have to get there. How do you get there? You make those steps through. And then when you end up there and somebody says, I'm having this very bad security problem with this server operating system, and you can go, well, I used to be a server operating system administrator for that OS. I know exactly what we should be doing. Now let's apply these security principles to it. It's remarkable how it all stacks right on top of each other.
Yeah, how everything works together.
It does.
Well, you know what, Professor, that helped very much. I appreciate everything that you do for all of your viewers and listeners on here. I think I'm just going to continue with the Network Plus and then move on from there.
That's great. Thanks, Eric. I appreciate the call.
No problem. Sure, you have a great day. Thanks for taking it.
Absolutely. That's my pleasure. I couldn't do this without everyone else watching the videos, going through and calling in, participating in our Q&A. There's so much there. In the chat room, some questions have come in. Question about port aggregation. And I'm assuming you're referring to physical switch port aggregation, which you run into all the time in the enterprise, even in smaller organizations. I look at what I'm running here. For example, How would I use it? What is it good for? It's actually extremely useful to be able to aggregate ports. So in my network, I have almost everything that's here. Well, everything that's here is connected over a gigabit Ethernet network, except some of the mobile devices that are on my mobile network. So I've got, for instance, this is my primary editing and workstation. That's my iMac, which does have a 10 gig connection in the back, but all of my infrastructure is 1 gig. Now, also in my data center, which is a closet in the other room with a 19-inch rack that's in there, I've got a NAS device with about 30 terabytes of storage that I use for backing up all of my data. So all of my video that's here whenever I shoot it, so I'm shooting video next week, I sit down, I shoot 6 videos a day or so, and I take all those videos as soon as I'm done, and I copy them all to my NAS. Now, these are videos that each one of them is about 20 to 30 minutes long. By the time you get it, they're about 7 to 10 minutes long. But the video in its raw form is about 30 minutes long, and there's 2 videos that I edit with. One that's the video of me, which is the headshot that you see here, and the other one is what is on my screen, and then I edit them together and do the picture and a picture of me up in the corner. So I need both of those video streams at their full resolutions. I take all those video streams, they might be 20 gig, each one of them. Maybe not quite as big, between 10 and 20 gig. I have to copy all of those off to my NAS. So they're going over a 1 gig connection. What would be nice is if on my network, I had multiple interface cards on these devices. And instead of having a 1 gig connection, I could aggregate multiple links together. And in fact, I could aggregate links between my NAS and the switch. I could tell the switch, don't have a single 1 gig connection to the NAS. Let's use 2 of those interfaces and effectively aggregate them together. Make them look like they are a single, twice as big Ethernet connection running at 2 gigabits per second. And you can, of course, keep going with that. You could expand them. For instance, my switch will support an aggregated link of 4 interfaces at one time. So I could have, and in fact, my NAS has 4 interfaces on it too. I could have 4 gig connectivity, 4 gigabit per second connectivity to that NAS between the NAS and the switch. Now, obviously, I still have my 1 gig connection between me and the switch. So that's really why I haven't done much link aggregation here. It doesn't give me a lot of advantages. But there is a way to add additional interfaces to servers, and servers all the time will aggregate links so that you can effectively double, triple, or quadruple the bandwidth available to a particular device just by using this port aggregation. The downside, of course, is you're using more ports on the device and ports on your switch, which are probably more expensive ports. So that's your challenge. And that's why people will, they need more bandwidth. They don't have 10 gig as an option, or maybe they have 10 gig and now they want to aggregate 10 gig links. So you can have 40 gig connections between different devices. So there's some nice advantages to doing port aggregation. I show some videos or some animation in my videos where I'm showing some of that port aggregation and where you would use it. It does come in handy, and especially can be useful in very large environments and enterprises that need that level of bandwidth between devices. Let's go back to the phones and see how things have been in the 202 area code. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Am I still there?
Hello.
Yes, I am. Hello, caller. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
My name is Anastasia. I'm calling from Washington, D.C.
Oh, welcome. What can we do for you?
Yes, I am currently in nursing field, and I am interested in doing nursing informatics. But I'm still lacking direction. Like, I'm trying to figure out which one should I really go to. What is your suggestion for?
What options have you seen available for you?
I've been looking through Security Plus,
Sure.
and also through networking.
Okay.
But I'm still struggling. I don't know, like, the balance, which exact direction should I go to. I'm now reading more of what nursing informatics does. Have you seen anyone in nursing or in healthcare profession that currently joined IT, and how do they, where do they pick up from?
Most of the time, especially in healthcare related fields, there's an enormous IT related requirements, not just in the functionality, because in healthcare today, enormous bandwidths are required to be able to send these images that are now all online. We're not printing them anymore. We're not putting them on a piece of film anymore. And in some cases we are, but for the most part, all of this data is also digitized and in a digital form. But we're also seeing management of the data and being able to manage and keep secure all of this very private healthcare information. So you're seeing in IT and hospitals, especially, and healthcare in general, a need not only to have a good foundation in networking and a good foundation in IT security, I guess what they're calling cyber security these days, but you're also needing more of a broader management of the data. So database management, being able to apply the proper security controls and policies and procedures, especially where HIPAA is involved, to all of this data, and to constantly make sure that all of that data is being managed properly. Is this the type of situation that you find yourself in?
Yes. But I don't know which course should I take. I'm trying to go for the certifications.
Sure.
Do the classes and then take the certification exam. So you think networking will be the perfect start for me, for someone that doesn't have any background in IT?
One of the things that I've said often, and it really does apply more than I think most people realize, is networking is the foundation of almost everything you do in IT. If you're going to be someone who's in charge of databases, you need a strong networking foundation. If you're going to be in charge of servers, probably even a stronger networking foundation. And if you're planning to do anything related to security, that is probably one of the strongest networking foundations you need, but networking touches everything. And so if you're planning, you're past the A+, or A+ doesn't apply to you, and you're planning to go into server administration, operating systems, databases, and especially security, having that knowledge of networking is so valuable. Many people tend to skip over it. And in some cases, like the federal government, will require you to have a Security Plus certification, and they don't really care as much that you have the Network Plus. I really think that should be separate. I think it should be swapped around. I think you should have the networking foundation and the security foundation on top of that. So those are the two pieces I think are going to be the most important parts as you go through your career. Now, ultimately, if you're planning to get a job, sometimes it's not what you need or what I tell you I think you need. It's about what the hiring manager thinks that you need. And sometimes that's the person you should be asking. Perhaps that's who you should go to and say, I want to get a job. What do I need? Is it better to have Network Plus and Security Plus? They might give you a different answer. And quite honestly, their answer is probably going to be more important than mine.
Okay.
Hopefully that gives you a direction and an idea of the scope of where you should be going with that.
Yeah, I'm trying to take the class for the Security Plus and then sit for the certification and go from there.
Well, a lot of people start with Security Plus. Whenever I got my between A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus was the first exam I took and passed. Then I got my Network Plus. Then I got my A+. I did it backwards. And a lot of organizations like you to have your Security Plus first and then decide where to go from there. Neither way is better or worse as long as ultimately you get that networking knowledge that you can then use later on in your career.
Okay.
And a lot of people on my site come to my site. They get their Network Plus certification. It's their first IT certification. They've got no experience in the industry. That's what they start with, and they do it because there's a need for the job that they're going into to have that Security Plus cert. So you would not be alone in pursuing Security Plus as your first step.
I do not have any experience whatsoever, but I'm interested in doing networking, and I like to work with computers, and I'm thinking of focusing my direction towards that area and doing my master's on nursing informatics.
I think you've got the right idea then from a Security Plus perspective to go to start with Security Plus. It's going to be a little bit harder to study for Security Plus without having that networking foundation, but it's not insurmountable. You'll simply learn it as you go with your Security Plus cert. And as I mentioned, a lot of people coming to my site, that's what they start with. So it's not an unusual thing at all.
Okay. Do you think taking the class, because I nearly signed up for an online class, but I wasn't really sure. I'm a hands-on person. I learned that way, but it's taking it in class. Which one do you think is preferable?
I think it's an individual decision that people need to make. I think there's a lot of value in attending a class with other people, whether it's a class that's online or whether it's a class that's done in person, as long as the online class is one that's actually in real time with an actual instructor and other people that you can communicate with. Because you're right, having that hands-on component is a very important part of learning the topics as you go. I mentioned you should have a good book, you should watch some good videos, you should do some Q&A, and you should get as much hands-on as possible. And I think that classroom environment gives you a chance to ask questions of an instructor, which many people don't for some reason, but it's a great opportunity to say, I don't know what you're talking about, step through it, and talk with other people that are in the class and get some good hands-on. Other people prefer not being in a class. Other people prefer learning out of a book. They do the hands-on on their own. I think it's more of an individual thing, and I think you should find the one that works best for you.
Okay. In terms of book, do you have any recommendations?
I don't have
Security Plus.
For Security Plus, I don't have a recommendation in a book. I used to recommend the GTS Learning series of books. I would use their books to help build my training courses. GTS Learning, though, was bought by CompTIA at the beginning of the year, and they no longer publish books independently. So I don't have any. I think that's another opportunity to go to Amazon. Amazon lets you read into some of these books on the Amazon website. Find one that has the right flow for you. Find one where the author's voice is one that you are comfortable with and you like the way the book is laid out. I think as long as it says it's a book for this latest version of the Security Plus exam, the SY0501, as long as it says that and it's one that you're comfortable with, I think you'll go. I think you'll be fine.
You said XY0?
SY0501. 501.
501.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much. And I'm also looking onto your website. I've been so much interested. I was waiting for this to come on, and I'm so lucky I'm available to take the class with you today.
Well, thank you for calling, and best of luck with your Security Plus studies. And please check in next month. Let us know how it's going.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for calling.
Bye-bye.
That is something whenever you start getting into finding the right tools, you just have to make sure you have the right versions. And that's why I mentioned SY0501. For those in the chat room, it looks like you already found it, but the exam objectives I mentioned, if you go to professormesser.com/objectives, I redirect you to the exam objectives, or go to the Google, type in CompTIA exam objectives. Probably the first thing that comes up. I would think it would be the first thing that comes up. Back to the phones. We got some time. It's got a 570 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name's Sean. I'm from Shamokin, PA.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for calling.
I have two quick questions. When I was in college taking my classes for like my networking degree, there was a type of software, I believe it was Cisco software we used. I don't remember what it was called, but it let you like theoretically install servers and routers and be able to like configure the ports and everything to theoretically like lay everything out like for practice. Is there anything like that that you know of that's like either really, there you go.
There, you're watching as we go. In fact, the Cisco Packet Tracer used to be a piece of software that you could only get if you were taking a Cisco or have taken a Cisco course. Just over a year ago, Cisco opened up the license. You can go to Cisco Packet Tracer, go to the Packet Tracer page, sign up, register on the Cisco site for free, and download and use that. It's a fantastic program to use, and it does exactly what you say. You can build a router simply by dragging and dropping some switches, connect them together virtually, turn them on, and set up virtual systems and ping between them on the screen. It's remarkable. You can build an entire network in a matter of minutes and start sending traffic back and forth between them. It's a great tool.
Okay. And my other question is, having since graduated with my degree in IT network specialization,
nice.
I've also got my A+. I'm actually going for my Net Plus exam next Tuesday. In between, I've been trying to pick up any kind of, because like everywhere I look to get an IT job, it's like, oh, you have to have like so much experience already doing this stuff. And I'm like, how do I get experience doing this stuff when I haven't done it yet? Like, where should I go to get that initial experience to say I have experience so that I can have the experience qualification for these other jobs?
It's the catch-22 of anybody trying to get that first job in any career, which is they want experience, but they're not willing to give you the experience until you have the experience. The thing that I recommend, there's a few ways you can approach this. One of them is to get some experience. And that one of the ways to do that is to volunteer. There is a number of organizations that can help with that. Online, there's a number of lists of volunteer places you can go that are looking for someone who could simply come in once a week, spend a couple hours, make sure their systems are running the way they're supposed to be running, make sure the antivirus signatures are being updated, make sure their backups are performing properly, and then maybe contract with others to come in and perform some of the higher level functions. So that's one of the first things I'll recommend is even if you're volunteering and you're spending an hour on a Saturday, that qualifies as experience. And it gives you an opportunity. If you go in, you meet the people there, you create some relationships, they also become someone who can act as a referral or a reference when you go into one of these other jobs. So don't discount how much you're working with the fact that you're actually getting some practical experience. The other things that I would mention is to have your own home lab. There is a pretty good subreddit for this, Our Home Labs, I think it is on Reddit, where people will talk about the types of equipment they're putting in their home labs. And this would be a good opportunity to start working with virtual systems, to start plugging in a pfSense firewall and playing around with that. Since you're doing networking, having those types of a pfSense that's got snort in it where you can do some IPS. There are already some pre-built VMs out there that will do this. Having that in your lab or in your network of your home and running that for a week and then looking at the results of what the IPS found and what the firewall was able to block becomes some great stories that you can use when you're in an interview where somebody can say, tell me what you know about malware. Oh, let me tell you about some malware because I caught some coming through my network last week with Snort, and it fired off 1,000 alerts in an hour because of what somebody was trying to do on my network, and here's what they were doing. That is not experience that you think about as being a practical experience, but those types of stories really do help when you're sitting in an interview and somebody's trying to help you with getting some of that knowledge out on the table so that everybody knows some of the things that you know. They're probably not going to be running pfSense as their firewall. They're probably not going to be running Snort as their IPS, but I guarantee you they've got a firewall and they probably also have an IPS. And now you know the same type of technology that they're running. You're using exactly the same language. It's a different front end, but the topics and the signatures and the rules and everything that you're doing is the same across all of those different products. The third thing I'll tell you, and this one may be the most important one, is to already start building those relationships in the industry. I've mentioned this in other study groups, and it's incredibly important. If you wanted to be able to learn more about what people are doing with networking and get a networking job, go to the Cisco user group meetings in your area. They're open, they're free, or in some cases at a minimal cost. You can go and join for the year and go meet with the people that are managing Cisco devices and other devices that already are in the companies you're trying to get a job with. Meet those people. Have a pizza with them at the user group meeting. Ask them where they work. Say that, oh, that's interesting. I've driven by that building. Tell me what you do there. What do I need to know to get a job there? If you were in my position where I've got this degree, I'm doing this, and you wanted to get in the front door, get your foot in the door with your organization, what would you recommend that I do? And they'll tell you. They're at this user group meeting to meet people and to learn what other people are wanting to do. it helps to get your face out there. And then when you go to that interview with that company and you meet with someone who probably isn't the person who was at that user group meeting, you can say, oh yeah, I met Fred in your networking department at the Cisco user group meeting. He was telling me about that project you're doing with the thing and how interesting it was with the stuff. And those types of one-on-one personal connections become very important. So after you meet someone at the user group meeting, say, oh, I'd like to add you on LinkedIn. If you hear about anything happening at your company, please send me a LinkedIn message. I'll be glad to send you my resume, because the people that work in those companies also get paid if somebody they bring in as a referral gets hired. So there's also sometimes a financial incentive for an existing employee to bring you in the door if you are qualified. So take advantage of those financial incentives that they're putting on their employees by meeting them, setting up relationships with them, learning what they're doing, and just keeping them in the LinkedIn. You're going to meet them again, by the way, because this is a small group of people in a geographical area. You're going to see them at different user group meetings. You're going to see them at different trade shows. This is a great place to start meeting the people that you're going to run into throughout your entire career.
Where do I go to find where these events are and when they're happening?
Most large geographic areas are going to have these. So someone in my chat room is mentioning they're in Alpha, Florida. Well, I guarantee you in Tallahassee, there's a Cisco user group meeting. There's a Microsoft user group meeting. In Atlanta, it's the same thing. In Birmingham, in Orlando, in Jacksonville, in Tampa, in Miami, in Fort Lauderdale. So just throughout Florida, there's probably 5 or 6 of these. You should be able to Google and find the Microsoft user group meeting, the Cisco user group meeting, the VMware user group meeting. Just pick that big company and type in user group meeting. Usually they'll be in a meetup, or you can go directly to a website they've got set up to promote these things. ISSA is another good one for security. There's all kinds of user group meetings like this. Just go to those and start asking questions and meet those people. Get on their LinkedIn and keep following the path that it takes you.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Thanks for calling. Appreciate it, Sean. That is probably the number one thing. I mentioned earlier, and much earlier, it's probably another user group or another study group that we did, is that I've had 15 jobs in the industry. The first job I got, I didn't know anybody there. It's remarkable I got the job at all, but I got it. Every other position I've ever had in IT, whether within the company or going to a different company, somebody I knew worked there. So that's the one thing I can tell you that was the most important thing, is when I was ready to move somewhere else, somebody I knew was already working at that place. And I could ask them, got any positions open? What positions are they? All right, let me send you my resume. Let me come in and talk. Oh, I know that person. People want to hire people they can trust. And it's a good way to do it. And having those relationships is so important. So one of the questions in the chat room, if you pass certs for A+ and Security+, if you do CEUs, should you apply that Security+, will that update the expiration dates for both of your certs? CompTIA stacks certs in a particular order of importance. And for CompTIA, they stack the Security+ at a higher level than the A+. They think the Security+ should be considered at a higher level. So one of the things that they do is when you're ready to renew, you only renew the highest level certification you have. And by renewing the highest level certification, you are then renewing all the certifications under it at the same time. So if you have an A+ and a Network Plus and a Security Plus, and then you renew your Security Plus, it is now also renewed your Network Plus and your A+ at the same time. There's a list of those renewals on the CompTIA website under continuing education. It may take a bit to go through the website and find exactly what you're looking for, but you can step through the overview and they show you all the different certifications that they have and what they're associated with. And you can choose your renewal path and they'll show you the different paths that are available, whether you do it with a single activity or multiple activities. They'll show you all the different options that are available. You can see they're all listed. There's tons of information on the CompTIA website about all of that. But they do step you through and give you the list of the priorities of the stacks of what's more at a higher level than another. So you'll know exactly what those things are when you run into them. That's a pretty basic one. I will mention, a lot of people don't realize that now there are these single activity renewal options available with CertMaster CE. The CertMaster CE is an online, if you passed your 800 Series A+, your N10006 network, or SY0401 or earlier Security Plus, you can simply take that one CertMaster for the Security Plus. It's $200. It takes 4 to 6 hours, and you're renewed for 3 years. You don't have to collect CEUs. You don't have to scramble around and do a lot of different topics. You don't have to listen to this for an hour. You don't have to go to a trade show. You don't have to write blog entries. You don't have to go to a training class. You don't have to get a higher level certification. You just pay that money. And when you pay the money for the CertMaster CE, you don't have to pay the renewal maintenance fees. So it replaces that. So for about the same cost and 4 to 6 hours of your time, you're renewed for 3 years. I don't know why everybody doesn't do that. That's what I would do. That seems like a no-brainer. So in this scenario, you mentioned you have your A+ and your Security Plus. If you went here, you took the CertMaster CE for $200, spent 4 to 6 hours, got all the questions right, submitted it, you're now renewed your Security Plus and your A+ for another 3 years. There you go. All done. So easy. So simple. That's what everybody should do. Well, thanks for being here for another hour of the after show Q&A. We did the great Q&A in the first hour. Thanks for being here for that. Thanks for your phone calls. Thanks for your messages in the chat room. Thanks for just being here. We couldn't do it without you and sticking in here and being here for a week late because of our hurricane. Next week is our Security Plus study group. Come back for that. It's also on Wednesday at 12 noon, my local time. I guess we're still in daylight savings time. Daylight saving time. Got it wrong. Got it corrected. So be here for that next week. We'll do Security Plus, and then we just wrap right into November, and we'll do A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus again. It never ends. There's always something to do here. Come back for those. You can, of course, sign up for our notification lists on our website so that you get an email from me every time we go live, or simply subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll get a notification there as well. Thanks for being here. Thanks for all of your questions throughout the month. Come back next month. We'll do this again. It'll be great. Thanks for joining us this time, though. We'll see you next time on the Network Plus Study Group.